4分ですね。少々お待ちください。I'll start the presentation in 4 minutes, so just hang on a second. I'll start at 30 past. 3 more minutes. Thank you. それでは時間になりましたので、そろそろ始めたいと思います。まだみんな揃っていないですが、いろんな人に言ったのは、もし、英語嫌であれば6時からご参加くださいと言いましたので、後から、参加する人もいると思います。I told a few people that maybe if they if they are not confident in their English ability, maybe they can join from later on. So this is why we don't have so many members now, but I'll start nonetheless. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for finding time to attend this Refugees and Sustainable Development Goals information session. I'll be speaking mostly in English, but sometimes I'll say a few words in Japanese, so I ask you for patience, just making sure everyone understands. 皆さん、こんにちは。難民と持続可能な開発目標の説明会にご参加してありがとうございました。こちらでご覧のようにミーティングの前半で使っている言語は英語になります。 ちょっとチャレンジとして思ってください。時々日本語でも説明する予定です。何か質問があれば、いつでも質問してください。説明会の後半は、リラックスできる時です。難民の活動家というアミリ・パロアナさんの講義には、日本語の字幕がついてからです。ご安心ください。さて、本日のミーティングを始めさせたいと思います。So let's start today's information session. Just a second. So first of all, I would like to answer one of the questions from participants. ご参加する方が一つの質問がありましたから、すぐ、答えします。では質問は、議題は難民の受け入れについてでしょうか、それとも難民の出さない社会づくりについてでしょうか。So the person is asking whether we are going to be talking about creating a society that does not create refugees, or whether we will be talking about accepting refugees by, among other things, developed countries. 私の答えは、基本的にはここでは持続可能な発達目標の実現で難民を出さない社会づくりに集中したいですが、確かに日本などで難民の受け入れについても少し述べる予定です。So I'll talk mostly about how we can create a society that does not create refugees by making sustainable development goals a reality by implementing them. But I will also touch on the topic of accepting refugees, mostly in Japan, in the later part of presentation. So let me proceed to the actual part of presentation. First, let me explain the international understanding of the word refugee from legal perspective. こちらでは法律的な視点から言う、難民の定義について述べたいと思います。Movements of people, including forced movements, Kyosei Ido, have been a part of our history for a long while. In 1951, they were finally enshrined in the Geneva Convention, in Japanese, ジュネーブ条約, also called the Refugee Convention, 難民条約. According to it, a refugee is someone who is unable or unwilling to return to their country of origin owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. Japan has also signed the convention in 1981. So on the map, you can see that by now, most of the world has adopted the convention. The countries in green are the ones that adopted. Following the Geneva Convention, there has been the 1967 protocol that removes some restrictions so that one can be considered a refugee. Countries that signed the protocol also agreed to abide by the Refugee Convention. So even though the US, in yellow, signed the protocol only, it should be accepting the convention's definitions of refugees. So if some of you frowned at US for not really accepting the convention itself, actually, technically speaking, they should be abiding by the convention as well. Let's talk about some very important part of the Geneva Convention called the Principle of Non-Refilement. ジュネーブ条約の一部は大切な原則で、送還の禁止という、ことです。Importantly, the 1951 Convention also includes the principle of non-refoulement, under which the signatories are not allowed to expel a person seeking asylum back to their country, where they would face persecution and potentially death. No reservation are permitted to this rule. この原則には例外なしです。So, for example, if a refugee from North Korea reaches Japan, it is strictly prohibited to deport them back to their country of origin. In reality, however, Japan is not a very common destination for North Koreans. Instead, they often escape to China and then to South Korea. Although China was one of the signatories of the Geneva Convention, it refuses to recognize North Koreans as refugees and notoriously deports them back to their countries. So we can see that even the countries who signed the Geneva Convention are not actually necessarily abiding by the rules of it. More about the Geneva Convention. ジェネーバ条約によると誰に難民になれるのかと説明したいと思います。If you are one of the millions of repressed civilians that suffer from the Syrian civil war and you flee abroad, you are considered a refugee under a Geneva Convention. If you are a member of persecuted national or religious minority in a certain country, for example, if you are part of the Rohingya Muslims minority in Myanmar facing the threat of genocide, or if you're a Christian Catholic in Indonesia and you start getting threats from the Muslim majority, which forces you to leave your country, you are also considered a refugee. Another case, if you are a homosexual in a country that criminalizes homosexuality, for example, if you are gay or lesbian in Iran that punishes sex between men with deaf and women with deaf, and thus you have to flee, you are also considered a refugee. If you are transgender in Saudi Arabia, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Syria, and other countries that criminalize gender expression of trans people, and you flee your country, you are considered a refugee under the Geneva Convention. If you are, or you support an opposition candidate in a country led by a dictator, face persecution due to it, and flee your country, you are also considered a refugee. An example of this is Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, who was running in the elections against the authoritarian leader of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, this year, and faced multiple threats due to her activism. So you can see that the convention encompasses a myriad of social and political circumstances that could force one to leave their country. However, it does not take into consideration other factors, such as environmental factors. So people who left their countries due to deteriorating environment, deforestation, desertification, natural disasters, and so on are not considered refugees under the Geneva Convention and are not given the protection that is entailed. I'll talk about it in later slides here. これでこちらはいろんな社会的な理由で難民になり得る状態が見えますけど、実際これは社会的に関してのもののみです。例えば、砂漠化で家から出るしかない人であれば、強制移動といっても、ジェネーブ条約によると難民として呼ばれないものです。このことについて後でも述べる予定です。Before we proceed, I would like to touch on other terms related to people who left their homes, and those terms are often confused or replaced with the term refugee, which is something we shouldn't be doing. Let's start with internally displaced people, 国内避難民. Instead of fleeing abroad, many people are forcibly displaced within their own countries of origin. For example, people in Bangladesh who live in low-lying areas could suffer from flooding and be forcibly displaced to a region further away from the sea, more uphill. Someone else could flee the threat of criminal groups in their hometown and move to another city. Although, same as refugees, internally displaced people were forcibly displaced, they did not move to another country. Therefore, under the 1951 Convention, they are not considered to be refugees because they are not guaranteed the same legal protection as refugees. Internally displaced people are very vulnerable to human rights violations. ここでは言いたいことは、国内避難民も難民も強制移動させられた人なのに、難民だけは法律的で今いろんな権利を持ちしてます。難民は、自分の国から他の国へ行って、安全を探していますけど、国内避難民はもう強制移動したのに、自分の国から出られないから、これで権利が結構異なっています。だから強制移動なのに、この人が求められる権利が異なっています。Migrants, on the other hand, 移民 is a word used to describe people on the move, people who left their homes, though there is no official legal definition. Migrants include people who left the countries seeking education or better jobs or avoiding famines and droughts. In other words, for a reason other than persecution. で、迫害以外の理由で家から、出た人は移民と呼びます。Referring to refugees as migrants is not only wrong, but it obscures the fact that refugees had no choice but to leave their countries and puts them in the same bag as people who chose to move. Media often manipulate the reader's perception of refugees by calling them migrants or spread misinformation by calling them illegal migrants, even though all people are granted the right to flee persecution, which is a right stated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and crossing international borders as refugee is not considered illegal in the Geneva Convention. So if someone tries to call refugees illegal migrants, they're just simply wrong and spreading misinformation. So that was a little clarification here. And now we're going to talk about SDGs that relate to refugees. それでは難民に関連する持続可能な発達目標について少し話したいと思います。And now so the goal that is closely tied to forcibly displaced people is goal 10, most of all, reducing inequalities, which entices bridging the gap in wages, living conditions, access to education, civil rights, and so on. The fourth indicator of the 10.7 target is the proportion of population who are refugees by country of origin. This provides a basis for measuring whether a country is implementing Goal 10 by the number of refugees it produces. So, for example, Syria, that produces the highest number of refugees in the world, will have a low Goal 10 score if we use this framework. However, there is no indicator directly stating the acceptance of refugees into a country. So, Poland and Japan, which have extremely low number of successful asylum status applications compared to other developed countries, are not necessarily going to be evaluated on SDGs in this field. This does not mean that they will be not evaluated at all. Though the 10.7.4 indicator is the only place among the 169 targets and 247 indicators where the word refugee is clearly mentioned once in the whole document only. Refugees are also referred to as migrants in this document. Migrants is more widely represented in the SDGs framework, so even if they don't consider people refugees, they will consider them migrants, and those have some other protections in other parts of the SDGs framework. Still, the umbrella term migrants, as I said, includes economic migrants and people who left their country less of a necessity and more of a desire to do so. This replacement of refugees with migrants could lead to erasure of forcible displacement from social perception and, in society's eyes, remove refugees' mandate to seek asylum in accepting countries such as Japan or Poland. I would also like to mention that when you visit the Japanese government website listing the SDGs and the indicators, you will not find the indicator relating to refugees. Instead, refugees are mentioned in the main 5 of the 10.7.2 indicator under the number of countries with migration policies that facilitate orderly, safe, regular, and responsible migration and mobility of people. I could not find the reason for this merging in the official sources, but the fact is that there used to be an indicator clearly mentioning refugees in the international framework, but in Japanese framework, it's been shifted under one of the indicators, so kind of giving it less weight. But as I said, I'm not sure why they did that, so I can't tell you whether what's the thinking behind this. ここでは、指標、難民についての指標がありますけど、日本ではこの指標は、日本の政治のウェブサイトで見つけられません。この指標は、他の指標と合計されてしまいましたけど、理由はちょっと見つけられませんでしたね。で、次の SDGs についてですね。 Though the refugees are only referred to clearly in this community due to its limited access to medication during their journey from their country of origin. Refugees often end up in temporary prisons and when they are stopped by border guards or in refugee camps when they are waiting for their asylum application to get processed. Those places offer little to no access to healthcare and offer very poor living conditions, promoting diseases and deteriorating mental health. I'm talking about depression here, utsubio. Those same places provide extremely limited access to education, number 4, for the children living there, which is associated with goal 4, quality education. Currently, 40% or 7.4 million refugees and school-age children are school-age children. 3.9 million of them do not have access to any form of education. So we can see that most of them cannot get even basic education in their state. Families of refugees fleeing their countries are obviously very vulnerable to many types of exploitation. This exposes particularly girls and women to discrimination, sabetsu exploitation, and gender-based violence, which can be tied to Goal 5, gender equality. Moreover, as I mentioned before, many countries criminalize lesbians, gays, bisexuals, transgender, queer, and intersex people, which forces many of them to become refugees. I mean, if there's a country that punishes being gay with death, you really don't want to take chances and you're probably going to flee. The Asian countries that criminalize LGBTQI people include Myanmar, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Indonesia, and most Middle East countries, so Pakistan, Afghanistan. Punishment vary by country and include imprisonment, whipping, and even death. So in Myanmar, Bangladesh, and so on, it's usually prison and whipping. In Middle East, it can be death. And then there is goal 16 at the bottom, last but not least. When you read about it in the UN website, the word refugees comes up instantly. In 2018 alone, over 70 million people ran away from war, persecution, and conflict, which is a 70-year high, impressively. The aforementioned tensions are the major drivers of forced displacement, and implementation of Goal 16 for creating peaceful and inclusive societies can help to reduce the number of refugees. This would also reduce the number of the strain on the countries that are usually accepting refugees. So by promoting peace somewhere else in the world, you can ensure the well-being of your own society by removing the strain that the refugees put on your country's budget. And then, last but not least, I would like to turn your attention to Goal 14, Kikohendo. Goal 14, climate change, is not tied to the displacement in such an obvious way as the previous goals. However, as we find out more about the complex phenomena tied to our changing environment, we can also conclude that forced displacement can be related to climate change. This was also recognized by the majority of United States member states. At the end of 2018, most of the UN General Assembly adopted the Global Compact on Refugees, 難民に関するグローバルコンパクト, that states that climate, environmental degradation, and natural disasters increasingly interact with the drivers of refugee movement. This isn't a very strong statement, but it states that there is a relationship. There are several examples of climate change-related phenomena that force people from their homes, such as scarce national resources, for example, scarcity of drinking water or too little fertile land. It is particularly easy to understand it in the context of desertification, sabakuka, which makes the land too dry to grow crops and climate too hostile for livestock to survive. However, climate change is not limited to only that. Because climate change leads to increase in number and severity of extreme weather events that lead to forced displacement. And so the 2018 flooding in Philippines or drought in Afghanistan could be partially attributed to climate change. Over the last years, there have been several droughts in my home country, Poland, which has rarely suffered from this event. So I can see that even in my hometown, there's some extreme weather events related to climate change. Of course, it is impossible to say for certain whether any single extreme weather event can be attributed to climate change. But when we look at their total number every year, we can see an increase over the years of those extreme weather events. It is also possible that seasonal events, such as typhoons in Japan in autumn, will not change in number, just increase in severity over time, increasing the numbers of victims and people who need to be evacuated from areas of danger, although right now I'm talking about internal displacement. Media started using terms like climate refugees to refer to people displaced by extreme weather events. However, the disasters usually lead to internal displacements only. It's not only, but not displacements across the borders. The Geneva Convention only recognizes people fleeing from persecution, not because of environmental conditions, and only fleeing abroad, not within their country. So legally, for those two reasons, people forcibly displaced due to natural disasters are not recognized as refugees. As a result, 18.8 million people who were internally displaced due to extreme weather events in 2017 alone are usually referred to just as migrants, environmental migrants, climate migrants, but never actually refugees. Even UNHCR, which is an agency that relates directly to refugees, even them, they refer to them as persons displaced in the context of disasters and climate change, quote unquote. ここで言いたいことですね。もし気候変動に関しての、イベントがあれば、例えば大きい台風とか、これで強制移動させられた人がいました。主に、他の国に行く人ではなく、国内で、移動する人がいます。これは理由の一つ。理由の二つ目は、ジェネバ条約では、ジェネバ条約では、社会的の理由だけで難民として認められています。これでは、この2つの理由で、ジネーブ条約によると、気候変動で強制移動させられた人は難民として、認められません。However, scarcity, so even though they can't be recognized as refugees by the Geneva Convention just because of climate change, scarcity of natural resources due to climate change can encourage conflict within and between countries. These conflicts can in turn force people from their homes, which could make them refugees in the eyes of 1951 Convention. So climate change will not directly make you a refugee in the eyes of the Convention, but it can drive tensions that can escalate and thus indirectly make you flee your country. An example includes a rise in terrorist activity in West Africa due to desertification-induced shrinking of Lake Chad that used to provide livelihood for many communities. ここで直接、気候変動は直接、人を難民することはないと言っても、気候変動による、天然資源の不足で戦争がなり得る。この戦争で自国から逃げた人は難民として、認められています。だから直接的気候変動は、直接的、難民にしないけど間接的は、あり得るものです。So what I want to say here that there is many SDGs related to refugees. Most of them relate to the lack of adequate implementation of those SDGs, and that's why refugees are there in the first place, because they do not have access to many things in their own countries, and there is big inequalities between different communities. This is a point that Parwana is also making, but by implementing SDGs, even though refugees themselves aren't mentioned directly in most of the SDGs, by implementing SDGs, we can decrease the number of refugees. And the same goes, for example, for racism. Racism isn't directly referred to in many places of SDGs, but if we could But if we could reduce the systemic gap wage, for example, if we could reduce inequalities, the problem of racism would also be solved. So the point I want to make here is that SDGs provide a framework to solve many of the world's problems, even if they're not directly stated in the SDGs. But of course, you can argue that this leads to a certain erasure of certain problems, like if we don't speak about racism, how are we supposed to solve it? Which is a point that I totally appreciate. So, ここで言いたいことは、持続可能な発達目標の実現では、難民の数を減らすことができます。いろんな問題が実は SDGs の実現で解決できます。直接的に SDGs は、例えば人種差別のこと、難民のことはそんなに言ってないのに、それぞれの、ゴールを、実現すれば、このような社会的問題も解決できるもの。例えば、不平等がなければ、難民の数も減らすでしょう。もし自国で、普通に治療にも、教育にも、安定にもアクセスできれば、国から逃げる理由もなくなりますでしょう。で、次。So let us look at the breakdown of refugees by the country of origin. Unarguably, Syria is the largest source of refugees worldwide. Since 2018, over 6.6 million Syrians became refugees, and over 6.7 million, it's not actually written here, and over 6.7 million were internally displaced due to Syrian civil war. ここでは、6.6 ミリは、難民になりましたけど、あとの6.7 ミリは、国内避難民になってしまいました。And those people were displaced due to Syrian civil war that claimed 250,000 lives. So really, those people are fleeing for their lives, which is explaining why there's so many of them right here. Next comes Venezuela, which is considered something of a special case. Most people escaping that country fitted the definition. Many people escaping that country fitted the definition of a refugee set out by the Geneva Convention. However, many fit neither the refugee nor the migrant definition because they're not always fleeing for their life. In many cases they are, but not always. But also, you can't tell that they weren't forced by the economic conditions, which are tragic. So this prompted UNHCR to adopt a wider definition of a refugee in the case of Venezuela, so that you could actually consider them to be refugees. If you look at websites, sometimes they are listed, sometimes they are not listed. So for example, here they say refugees and Venezuelans instead of just refugees, because special case. I'm not saying it's good or bad, I leave it up to you. After Venezuela comes Afghanistan, where our guest speaker is coming from. People there are commonly fleeing violence from Taliban and other terrorist groups, as well as its own government. 私たちのゲストスピーカーはアフガニスタン人で、あそこの人は主にタリバンとテロから逃げる人が多いです。South Sudan and Myanmar produced respectively 2 and 1 million refugees. And the situation in Myanmar shocked the world in 2017 when its army launched the ethnic cleansing of 1 million people, 1 million people strong Rohingya Muslims minority who had to run for their lives to Bangladesh, which was one of the most shocking humanitarian crises of this decade. Before I proceed, I would like to debunk the myth of refugee wave attacking Europe or Japan or any other developed country. According to UNHCR, 85% of the world's refugees are actually hosted by the developing countries, such as Turkey, Colombia, and Pakistan. This means that, contrary to common beliefs, the largest weight of the refugee crisis is actually carried by the poorer countries. ここで言いたいことは、難民になった人は主に途上国に住んでいます。日本のような発達した国ではなく、お金持ちの国ではなく、主に、トルコやパキスタンのような途上国になっています。次には ピースについて少し述べたいと思います。ここでは、いろんな方、興味深いのではないかと、思いましたので、いろんなことについて話したいと思います。So this one is about Japan, so I'll use a lot of Japanese here. Please hang on with me here. Let's start from the 70s, from 50 years ago. One of the biggest refugee accepting events in Japan happened in 1970s. After the Vietnam War, Japan accepted around 10,000 refugees from Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. Unfortunately, recent years showed a steady decline in this generosity. So there was this one event where a lot of people came to Japan, but since then, they haven't been accepting this many refugees, especially as you can see on this graph. So many people actually file applications for asylum in Japan. So you can see a graph here. This is the year, and this is the number of applications. And in red over here, you can see the number of successful applicants. I'm not kidding. So there is, for example, 7,000 applications here and only 27 were successful. ここでは難民申し込みの数になります。ここ X 軸は、年、例えば2001年とか、赤字で示すのは、難民のスタートスと確定者の数になります。実際に難民と日本の政治が認められた方です。So you can immediately see that it is virtually impossible to receive refugee status in Japan lately. So most recent data from 2019. From 2019 shows that there is 10,375 asylum applications, but only 44 of them were accepted. So if you calculate that, I actually calculated that, that's 0.4% acceptance rate. これで計算すると合格率、実際に難民として認められた人は、0.4% の人のみです。これで他の国に比較してみようね。So let's compare it to overdeveloped countries such as Canada and Germany. You can see on the left that Japan accepted just a tiny fraction of what, for example, USA did. And that is under the Trump's administration, which was heavily against refugees, to say the least. But there is 3 times more people in US and Japan. So let's compare it by population size, because there is no point to compare it otherwise. So we can see the population size here and the number of accepted refugees here in thousands, and this one in millions. So let's compare some countries that are similar in population size. The closest one is Germany, right? So for example, in Germany, with 83 million population, it accepted 9.6 thousand refugees, while Japan, with much larger population of 127 million, accepted the aforementioned 44 people. So you can see Germany here and here, okay? And Japan is like here and here. There's a big difference. Traditionally, instead of accepting refugees, Japan make big financial contributions to UNHCR. Here's the description in Japanese, UNHCR. This was a way to honor Sadako Ogata, who was the first woman and the first Japanese to head the UN Refugee Agency. However, Japan's contribution to UNHCR have been steadily falling over the last years. So what's going on? Several reasons. Japan Immigration Bureau is considered to be very stringent when processing the applications for asylum, and those can take up to 3 years, and some even take up to 10 years. An NGO called Japan Association for Refugees, 難民支援協会, claims that it is because the ministry have a stronger stance of controlling rather than protecting refugees. Moreover, compared to other countries, there's very little transparency on the determination of refugee application decision and fairness of the process. So if you ask why wasn't I admitted, you can only get a very limited answer. Only 6 months after filing the application are the refugees allowed to take on jobs, which leaves them without source of income for that period. They are eligible to receive allowance from the state, but the application also takes a few months, and the support is 2.3 2/3 of the welfare fund in Japan. So it's pretty hard to survive on that. And so NGOs that work to support refugees have to satisfy their basic needs like food and shelter instead of focusing on the integration into society, which would also increase their chance of actually successfully passing the asylum procedure. Because of limited income, refugees in Japan suffer from lack of access to basic healthcare services. ここで言ったことは、難民申請してから6ヶ月仕事できない。で、この時は、お金がない状態で、本当に難民たちは苦労しています。で、他に言いたいことは、もうお金ないことで日本では治療へのアクセスは、難しいです。だから、いろいろ苦労しています。だから、日本で働いている、難民支援協会などの NGO で、基本的な、必要しか満たさない、みたいです。例えば、日本語の授業ではなく、お金を使って、この難民の一人は、一日何か食べるためにお金を使います。だから結構、苦しいです。One of the dramatic issues is the fact that children of refugees born and raised in Japan are also considered refugees. And so when they turn 18, they have to file an asylum application in Japan to be allowed to stay. If they're rejected, they face deportation to a country they have often never been to before and know nothing of its language and culture, so it's very dangerous for them. We are talking about children that speak native level Japanese, who went to Japanese schools, and who know Japanese culture inside out, actually facing a threat of getting deported. And this is actually happening in some cases that they don't pass the application for the refugee status. 大切なのは、日本で生まれ育てた難民の子どもたちは、18歳になると、難民申請しないといけない、ことになります。でももし、この難民と日本の政治の決定で難民ではないと言われたら、自国ではないのに自国に、送還されます。これで言語を知らないままも文化も知らないままも伝統も知らないまま、アフガニスタンとか、送還されてしまいます。だからもう、日本語を喋っている人、日本に育てた人も日本の文化知ってる人も送還する恐れがあります。本当にこちらは大変です。Since it is so hard to gain refugee status in Japan, many refugees take a different approach and instead try to stay here as skilled workers, which is something that Venezuelans often do, but not only in Japan, but generally abroad. So, okay, this was a bit longer than I wanted it to be. Let's get to our guest speaker. I tried to introduce the very broad topic of refugees to you in 25 minutes, and I went over 30, so it was frankly a challenge to fit in. Nonetheless, I hope you learned a thing or two and you liked it. かなり広いテーマを20分か30分間説明してみましたが、もちろん言いたいことはまだたくさん残っています。でも、社会的な議題について考えるとき、その、議題で一番影響される人々の意見を聞く必要があると私は個人的に信じています。これで難民のことを理解するために難民の一人であるアミリー・パルワナさんの経験と意見について学びましょう。じゃあ、英語のイントロしますね。I strongly believe that when approaching a social issue, the first person to ask and rely on when making the judgments and decisions are the people that are the most affected by a certain issue. And so when discussing the issues of homelessness, we should ask the homeless. And when talking about abortion, we should rely on the opinion of women. In the spirit of nothing about us without us, I contacted a person who is currently a refugee. She agreed to speak to us about her experiences and her extensive activism related to sustainable development goals. Let us listen to Parwana Amiri. Give me a second here. I'll just switch the sharing to another screen. ちょっとシェアの設定しますので、少々お待ちください。かすみさん、これで大丈夫ですか？見えますか？
Yes, I can see.
Okay. Okay, so I'll play it for now. It's 35 minutes long. I'm sorry for going over the time, but please make sure to watch this because this is way more important than what I was saying. I'm sorry to take so much time. Just a second. Okay. Good afternoon, Parana. Thank you very much for finding. Good afternoon, Parana. Thank you very much for finding time in your busy schedule to share your knowledge during this Refugees and Sustainable Development Goals information session.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. I'm really glad to have this opportunity to share my experiences and to connect the condition of refugees in Greek camps and also in other countries after they flee their country and their situation, beyond the borders, while passing the borders and everything to connect it with the sustainable development goals.
Before you proceed to your lecture, I would like to ask you a few questions that would let us understand your situation a little bit better. So my first question is, in your letters to the world from Moria, you mentioned that your family had to leave Afghanistan because of your father's political issues. Could you tell us more about those circumstances that forced your family to flee your home and become refugees?
Actually, my father was a businessman, and after that, he was also an activist, a political figure in the society. And after having some different activities with political activities, with the business and other, interfering with the government, and also having some, activities and also having some cooperations with the government in order to make the economy of the country and mostly the society in a better way, and running some projects for the labor of the people and having some entrepreneurship, it became a bit, it faced some threats from the some criminal group, and it was the main reason that we had to leave our country, and everything happened suddenly.
After fleeing Afghanistan and spending several months in Iran, you had to flee again due to racism, violence, and lack of access to education for you and your siblings. Your family tried to reach Turkey. Your mother and brothers have made it. However, you, your sisters, and your father were deported back to Afghanistan. Could you tell us more about the deportation experience which you faced back in your country and your journey back to Turkey to reunite with your family?
We didn't want to stay in Iran. It was not our destination. We knew about the condition of migrants and refugees in Iran. So we decided to not stay there, and only 3 months we were there in order to speak with a smuggler to transfer us from Iran to Turkey. Only my mother and my two brothers could pass the border. But when we attempted to pass the border, we got arrested by the police. We were put in a temporary prison for some days, and after that, we got deported to Afghanistan. Because our life was in danger, and we got separated from my mother and my two brothers, so we, without any pause, we started to continue our way. And from the southern province, we could go to Pakistan, and from Pakistan, we could pass the border of Iran, and from Iran, we could go to Turkey. So it was a long time. And one of the worst memories that I got from in Pakistan, it was like every time we were afraid that maybe the thieves will come across us. And another worst memory was that when we were trying to pass the desert, it was a desert in Pakistan, and we were trying to pass it. We had to stay for 2 or 3 days with Taliban in their house. And it was really scary to live with them without having any guarantee that you will go out of their house safe or no, alive or no, and if you can, see your family again. But as there was no other alternative, as there was no other option for us to choose, we decided to continue our way because there was no other way to give up, to stop, and to return back. Yes, so like this, we could go to Turkey and we could get reunificated with my brother and my two brothers and my mother.
So your family tried to cross the Turkish border, but then also from Turkey, you tried cross over to Europe. You tried to cross the EU border several times before you actually made it to the Greek island of Lesbos. I would like to ask you, how were you stopped from crossing those borders? Who stopped you? How did they treat you?
Mm-hmm. Every time when a refugee wants to cross if they want to enter the, Greek land, they need to cross the sea, Asian Sea. So we got arrested several times from the middle of the sea. So several times we got arrested by the Coast Guard, the Turkish Coast Guard, and they arrested us without giving, any food or any blankets or anything to, any dry clothes. We have to be in that condition for some nights, and they put us many times in temporary like prisons where many of the people were there. And after being there in temporary camp, we had to go to the town, like in Istanbul and Izmir or any city. But the unfair and the illegal point is that they were getting money from us. However, they were not able, to do that because European Union was giving them money, but they were taking money from refugees again and again. However, in the previous years, they were not doing that. But when they noticed that the refugees are not able to raise their voices to ask for the legal process, that they are not able to complain about their conditions for anyone, as they are captured and arrested by the host country, so they were taking as much money as they wanted. And for the families that they were not able to give money for the police in the police station or for the renting the car, they were putting them in a temporary camp for more months in order only to take the money again from them. So 5 times we had attempt to cross the border, Turkish border, and to enter to Greece. So, and in all these 5 times, we had to pay again and again, several times, and too much, But finally, in the 5th time, we could enter to Greece, and then we got transferred to Moria camp, and we stayed there for 4 months in an inhuman condition, without having access to even basic necessities. I think we were lucky because we had many times attempt to cross the sea and to cross the border, European border. But there are people that they lose their life in that sea. There are people that they lose their loved ones, they lose their children in that sea. Because it is only a dinghy, it is only a rubber boat that you are inside. So you can imagine that how hard it can be for the parents that they see that while facing a storm in the sea, in the midnight, when there is no light, they lose their children in front of their eyes. They see that their children are sinking in the water, but there is no one to help them. And I want to also mention that recently, many of the NGOs that they are working as as guardians in the sea, who are working to risk the life of the people who are in danger, they are getting deactivated by the state.
Yes, indeed. Many people lost their lives on the crossing in the Mediterranean. Some people say that Mediterranean is currently the biggest mass cemetery in Europe. And indeed, people who made it to Moria, even though the living conditions there aren't great, are the lucky ones, as you said. So thank you for answering my questions. That was the introduction that would let the audience get to know you better. And having heard all of your experiences, it is only now appropriate to hear even more about your activism. So, without further ado, let's proceed to your lecture.
Hello, good afternoon to all dear audiences. My name is Parvana Amiri. I am from Iraq province of Afghanistan, a refugee in Greece that currently I live in Ritsona refugee camp. I started all my activities from Moria camp. When in the first day I arrived to Greece in Lesbos Island with my family, the inhuman condition affected on my spiritual, on my psychological part, on my mental too much. But after a while, when I got in connection and I got introduced with some of the people who were highly supported the refugees in that island, I started all my activities from there. In the first glance, the condition was really inhuman for me. And I didn't know that from which part should I start. And I didn't know that what can be the fate of my life and the destination for all other refugees. So the only thing that I was able to do was to start doing my writings. So I started with writing about the condition from my perspective and from other person's perspective. And it was really important for me to raise and to show the existence of the whole inhabitants in that camp, and also to share their voices with other people, because I knew that there are people who were interested and who were really supporting the people who are separating these voices, who are sharing their stories, and the people who are supporting the refugees in the condition that they are living. And I want to connect it directly to the reduce inequality, the 10th goal of sustainable development goals, because when I was in Afghanistan, the economic condition, social condition, and the insecure condition affected on me and on my family, that we had to flee the country and we had to continue our journey to one of European countries. And if it wouldn't be like that, and if we would have equal economic, secure, social, and general condition in our country, we wouldn't need to escape from our country and to start migration to another country. After that, I started doing writings and started complaining about the inhuman condition of that island, the Moria camp. And also I related that to the perspective of different people that I was writing their stories. After that, when the people, especially Marilla Strokes, were supporting my writings and the Informal platform, one of the platforms of Welcome to Europe, they supported to publish my writings every Friday on their blog. It really encouraged me to continue my activities. After a while, I started my activities with the journalists in the camp, and I was working with them as a guider. When I was working as a guider with them, I came to the idea to write their stories more than ever. Because when I was working with the journalists, we were looking to the different parts of the camp. And when one of the times when I was we were making the reportage from the part of the olive grove, when the people were doing when they were baking breads and they were doing the bakery. I started speaking with one of the women that she was working as a baker and she was baking breads there. But the source that they were burning and they were making fire in order to bake breads, it was the olive trees. And they were burning the olive trees and the branches of the olive trees in order to bake breads. And as from the childhood, I was really interested to the environment, and I was doing many research about the reason that our environment is getting changed. I was really affected by that sin, because they were burning this olive branch and also the branch of the olive trees and the trunk of the olive trees in order to bake breads. They had to do that, and there were many people that it was the only way to earn money, to also for other people to have the nutrient system, and also for many of the people there was nothing else to eat there. But it could not be an excuse for any of them to burn the olive trees. But as there was no system and there was no one to prevent them from doing that, they were continuously doing that. And there were almost 13,000 olive trees in a part of olive grove that we were living there. But after 3 or 4 months, there was no olive tree green and alive there, and all of them were cut and they were burned by the bakeries there. I also want to mention about the impact of this information that was getting separated by the youths in the communities. When we started separating information mostly about the climate and also about the organic planting and crops, we could inspire many of the people and many of the adult kids in the communities to start planting some vegetables around their houses. And now I will send you the photos and you will be really shocked by the lands that they are full with the vegetables and they have a very good green view. So I want to directly connected this issue from our refugee life to the climate action, that the refugees can be a reason to improve and to empower the other people to act for the climate, and also they can be a reason to make bad impacts on the climate. When we got transferred to the Arizona camp as a family of the vulnerable members, as my father and my mother, they were highly vulnerable with the pains that they had in some of their body, and also the pain and also one of the problems that my father had in his knee. We could get transferred to the Arizona camp. And as the secondary camps are the camps that only the vulnerable people can get transferred, we could get transferred here. In the first glance, the condition of the camp was really different for me, and I was thinking that everything is different here and many things can be changed here. But I was wrong, because when we got transferred here, I noticed that all the refugee camps are highly separated from the downtown and from other local people. And it is also another part of inequality among us and other people, and we are highly getting discriminated by the state, and we are facing segregation from everywhere, from every side and from all people. The most critical point that at the moment all the children in the camp are facing it is about the education. We are still deprived of education. I am here for 1 year. It is 1 year that I am in Arizona camp, but before that 4 months in Moria camp. So totally 1 year and 4 months. But I haven't been registered for the school yet. I am not able to go to school and to participate in the public schools, because it is an excuse for the state to not have the registration for the registration of the children in the public schools, because we are living in the camp, and they say that the children that they are living in the camp, they are infected by the virus. So this will this will affect on the other children. So I started also my other activities in Arizona camp. In Arizona camp, I started with teaching, because I was also a teacher in Moria, and I was teaching in one of self-organized school that is called Wave of Hope for the Future School. It was managed, it was established, and it was founded by the refugees, by Mr. Zakaria Farzad. I was teaching English, and I had the English class, especially speaking class, and also another was the Secrets of Success. The Secrets of Success was a training season of giving information to the people who were interested by the ways of being a successful person, the ways how to be optimistic person. When the students were coming to the class, they were forgetting all their problems. too much, because there were many different activities that I was doing with them, playing music and listening to very quiet music and doing some yoga with them, because my idea was to empty their mind for 1 hour. And the effect of that trainings was for 24 hours. It means for 24 hours, they were keeping themselves very calm, and they were trying to not think about poisoning things, about thoughts that were bothering them. So it was really important for me. I can connect this to the quality education. There was no way for the children to go to school. And the initiative of the refugees that was running there, it was the only way for the children and adult camps to provide educational spaces for them. Unfortunately, in the secondary camp that is called Ritsona camp that now I am living in, the condition is the same. We are not able to go to school. We haven't passed the school enrollment, and we are not registered for the public schools. So I'm doing this unofficial process of education in Ritsona as well. And I'm working as coordinator of this team and also one of the teachers. So we are a group of 10 teachers who are teaching for the children, adults, and for the different communities. This action encouraged other communities to allow their women, to allow their girls and their sisters to these classes, because before that they were not able to participate in this educational activities in the camp. But after that, it really engaged and also encouraged other communities to do that. And the third point, I came to the idea to change the condition for the female genders of the camp, for the girls, for the women, because they were highly affected by the condition, but their voices were highly also repressed. So I was thinking that why the condition should continue like this. At this point, I started encourage them in order to act for their right to act for the education, to act for all injustices that they are facing in the camp. And it was not easy, of course. And I started having some private discussions with them in order to ask about their problems that they are not able to speak with other responsibles and the authorities of the camp. And I faced with too many important and too many shocking points. Like many of them were highly they were facing violence, sexual violence, physical violence, and economic violence, but nobody were able to speak about that. And like this I started, because many of the men in the camp and the male kings, they were looking to me as a empowerment point and empowerment person who can inspire other girls to do activities. So in many ways they wanted to prevent me in doing so many activities, and mostly in getting appear to the social media. But I continuously, and with too many endeavors and efforts, I decided to continue my activities, because I saw that they were making change. It was making change among many communities. So I decided to continue all that. After that, when I got to the point that there are also other girls who are interested in doing activities, but they only need to have a spark, to have a spark in themselves, and also to make this spark in their families, to show that if one person is able, if one girl is doing activities, we are also able to do that. And they needed to show themselves and their abilities both to their families and also to their relatives or to their communities that they are living in. So when I spoke with other girls in other communities and also to my community, we decided to make a group, and we decided to continue these activities in a huger way, in a wider in a wider form. So we created together the Youth Refugees Movement Group. And this youth refugees movement is the idea to separate awarenesses and information about the sustainable development goals. We created the logo, we created the name, we created the project, and also we created giving and separating the information between the communities. The idea was not only to separate information, but also to show that the girls are doing all these activities, and to show that the girls are doing research, separating research, and also they are able to self-organize things. And for me, it was a way to show their faces, to feature them, and to show to to other communities that the figure of a girl is not something to threat them, is not something to abandon them, and to not show that a camp is an obstacle to prevent them to have developments in their on their ways, and also to not only stay to see what the state is deciding about them. And it was only to show that the solidarity of the girls can, you know, make them to go to the highest point of their improvement. So it was really important for me to show this solidarity when they were working together as a groups, when they were going as a groups to other people, and they were giving this information from, you know, from groups to another group, from the space to another space, and they were separating this information in the common spaces where a lot of people were there, where a lot of people were discussing with each other. And so, of course, I want to directly connect this to the gender equality, because before all these activities that they were doing by the girls, mostly the boys were appeared in the camp. They were doing activities, but we were thinking that there is nothing to see boys better than the girls, and they should stand next to each other to make change. So after that, I mean, we didn't only stop our activities with separating informations and also educational informations on social informations among communities, but also we started creating sport teams. And first we started with the volleyball, and after that now we have the football team. So this football team has 24 or 26 members, and 3 times per day with a coach that we are getting trained, and he is training us in different ways in order to develop our ability and to develop our skills. It was important for us because I personally, I was, you know, speaking with many of the girls that they got depression. And it was really important to change their mentality, to change their mood, and also to create something new for them. Because most of them are facing violence. And I know the friends that are working with me, but before that, they were facing violence, you know, from their family. So I could not tolerate it much more, and I started inviting them and encourage them to participate in this football team. So of course it can be connected directly to the health and well-being, because like this we could take care of our mental health and also to take care of our physical health, in order to also show that if the boys have the football team and also other sport teams, we girls can also do that. But still the condition is not this what we want to have it and what we think we deserve to have it. Many things are getting and are going very bad for us, and the condition mostly during the pandemic, and now as we are in lockdown, the condition is going very bad and worse than ever, because not much people are caring about our condition, and we don't have connection with the local people, so they don't know much things about our everyday's life, our everyday's problem, and about the discriminations that we are facing from the state. So it is a problem that we cannot raise this information, and also to share our stories with other people. We are highly facing the injustice in the camps. It is not about only about daily life that we are facing problems, but also about the asylum procedure. also about the discrimination that is happening from different communities. Some of the communities are getting their asylum answer, faster and earlier than us, but we do not that, because there are many political reasons behind that. But if a refugee is in another country, there shouldn't be any consideration about the background of that country that he is coming from. But it is, the Arab community are getting their asylum answer earlier than us and faster than us. Their procedure is going faster than what the way that our procedure is going. And it is the same for Syrian communities. We are not telling that they are not, they don't deserve to get this, to have their procedure be fastened. But we want to have the same thing because we are living in the same country. But what we really want is to have the solidarity of other people, to have the solidarity of local people, to have people who are supporting us, who are standing as next to us, not to have them opposite of ourselves, not to see that they are standing in front of us. Because in many ways, when we are sharing these stories, we are a bit afraid because we are not sure, and there is no guarantee of that to see if there will not be any threat for our asylum apply. But we have this belief that all the stories of discrimination and inequality should be shared. So we young refugees and we young girls want to make change, and we know that this change will not happen only if we do things, but we need to have supports to make this change happen.
How can the viewers of this lecture, especially the students of Nagaoka University of Technology coming from Japan and from abroad, how can they support your cause, Parwana?
Mm-hmm. For me, the key word of all this change is solidarity. Because when there was no hope in my heart, and when I stood crushed by the terrible condition of my life, and the condition was highly affected in my soul and on my mind, the solidarity people, they supported me. They stood behind me, and also they gave me this strength to act too. It was their power, the solidarity's power of people, that they helped me to start acting. When I know that there are people and they are educated people who are going to listen to me, it is a very different feeling for me. Because for me, the change doesn't happen automatically. These three braids are the main change of our life. This is to make change in the mind, to change in the perspective and the view, and the change in the speech. And I do believe that the people that mostly in the universities who are doing research, they are able to do that. They are able to act in this field because they have influence, and they will have more influence in the societies, and they can make this change on the minds, and also they can be a change in the speech of the on the way that other people are speaking about the refugees. I hope that we will all stand for justice, for equality, and for a sustainable and equal world for everybody. We have a very famous quote that says that if you have the freedom, you should try to free another person. And if you have the power, you should try to empower another person. So this is sharing ability, and we are all responsible to share and to act on the way that we can. Because there is no more minutes and no more moments to wait for. And the actions are needed to be done now. Later will be very late.
Thank you very much, Parwana, for taking time to speak to the students of Nagaoka University of Technology and other people who were kind enough to participate in this talk. Thank you very much.
My warm greetings to all of you. Thank you very much. I wish the best for you, and I hope that I will be one day sitting on the chair of the university, and I will be able to improve my skills and my mind and the way of thinking better. So, and of course, it will happen by having the right for the education. So, thank you very much for everything.
Thank you. 皆さんいかがでしたか？ちょっとシェアスクリーンを変えます。少々お待ちください。じゃあ結論までね。これで私たちは工学者としてどうやって何をサポートできるのかとちょっと述べたいです。How can engineers support Parwana? How can we make change as the students of Nagaoka University of Technology? I have a little closing message for you here. As Parwana pointed out, we as university students and as engineers have a privileged position in society and can make a real and lasting change on how its future is going to look like. You see, the reason Parwana could speak to us today was that she had an electronic device and access to electricity and access to internet. How many more voices could be heard if more people could have this luxury? SDG 9 is often associated with high-tech and developed industry, but it encompasses many more fields. It is about providing internet access to over 4 billion people in the world who do not have it. It is about building roads in less developed areas, about giving 2.6 billion people access to electricity and 2.3 billion to adequate sanitation. It is about providing industrialization that is both sustainable and inclusive and doesn't just serve the richest part of the world. We as civil, mechanical, electric, bio, information science, and nuclear power engineers have the potential to help solve those problems, each of us in their own area of expertise. By providing someone with access to internet, you are going to change their life more than if you provide someone else with access to another app or another high-tech product that is slightly faster than the previous one. By doing research aiming to provide basic infrastructure, you have the power to change the life of more people to a higher extent. ここで言いたいメッセージは、SDG 9は、SDG 9はいろんな、想像すると多分ちょっと発達している国との、関係が強いのではないかと思いますけど、実際はいろんな基礎的なものにつながっています。インターネットへのアクセスとか、電力へのアクセスとか、いろんなものです。本日、パロワナさんの話が聞けました理由は、彼女は電気機器を持ち、インターネットへのアクセスがあったこと。電力へのアクセスがありました。このアクセスがもっと、広げたら、このインターネットのアクセスはもっと、いろんな人に提供できれば、また何人の声が聞こえるのか、何人の話が聞こえますか。これでみんなが考えさせたいことは、私たちがやってる環境は様々ですけど、基本的なインフラを提供する、研究であれば、より多い人の人生をより大きく影響できるのではないかと、みんな考えてほしいです。So how can anyone make change? 工学者でもなく、誰でもできることは、次になります。Here are some things that you can do right now, whether you're an engineer or not. Changing the speech starts from changing the perception, and changing the perception starts from you. Here are 2 links for a start. First one is to a Japanese organization, 難民支援協会, and the second one is to United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. You can also donate to schools run by refugees, including Parwana's school in Vitsona, using this Wave of Hope for the Future website. There's also a GoFundMe page to help with fixing the destruction after the Moria refugee camp burned down this autumn. So that's everything from me. Thank you very much for listening. We want to know your opinion about this talk, so could you please fill in the following enquete about this talk? I'll send you the link in a second. これで以上になります。ご参加誠にありがとうございました。この複雑なテーマについて聞いてくれて本当に感謝しております。ご参加した方の意見についてちょっと知りたいですので、1分だけあればアンケートでの協力をお願いしたいですけど、今チャットで URL をお送りしますので、少々お待ちください。チャット。Everyone. はい、今、アンケートのリンクをお送りしましたので、もし、よかったらご記入をお願いいたします。So, thank you in advance for filling in the enquete. So, we are running widely beyond the time frame. Feel free to leave the meeting if you have no questions. I'm sorry to have taken more of your time than I was allowed to. I hope you don't have any regrets. 皆さん時間をオーバーしてしまいましたので、もし質問がなければ退出していただいても結構です。質問があればぜひぜひ、聞いてください。So, does anyone have any questions concerning the presentation and Parwana's talk? I'll just stay here for a second if anyone has questions, but if you don't, it's fine to leave. Sorry to keep you there for too long. Oh, you raised hand. Iqbal Tahir, Iqbal Tahir, could you ask your question, please?
Yes, thank you very much for this eye-opening discussion on matters pertaining to refugees. This heart-wrenching talk of Parwana, which in fact is a problem of more than 3 million households, roughly speaking. But I appreciate their courage to face the hardships of life. At the same time, I think we must realize the problems of host countries as well. Like you mentioned in your presentation, that developing countries like Pakistan and Iran, they are hosting, a majority. Like in case of Afghanistan, around 95, roughly speaking, around 95% of the refugees are being handled by Pakistan and Iran at the same time. So in this, as you mentioned, there is a risk of terrorism and all these activities. So Pakistan has already lost hundreds and thousands of precious lives in this war on terror. So what do you suggest that at the same time, while ensuring the rights of refugees, how the developing countries or the host countries can better solve those problems, and how the organizations like UN and the developed countries can help them in dealing with those complex issues? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. So, okay, it'll take a while to answer. So, I think the easiest thing to do would be to, well, ideally prevent people from having to suffer from those conditions, to prevent refugees to emerge in the first place. And as you saw in this presentation, many of the biggest refugee crises happened through the war. So if we could promote SDG number 16 to a higher extent, if we could promote peace, justice, and strong institutions, we would prevent refugee crises like this from happening. So that's one way to do it. And then UN is largely responsible for that, but different countries can also help or can harm, because it is a very difficult situation that's happening in Syria right now, because you probably know about it because you're way closer, you're closer to that region as your country of origin. But Syria has become something of a war between different parts of Islam, and they are getting, those two organizations fighting each other are actually getting money from abroad, from the countries that represented the different parts of Islam, different sides of the church, right? So those neighboring countries are propelling this conflict. So they shouldn't be doing that, of course. So if we could reduce the number of people, but making sure the countries are also not carried by religious pride in what they're doing, and they're not supporting conflict, in, for example, Syria, just to show that their part of Islam is better than the other person's part of Islam, right? So there's some of the things we'd like to do, but the list is, of course, not exhaustive. Oh, thank you, Lisa, for sending the links for everyone. It's great. I didn't send it to you. Did that answer your question, Tahir? Sorry if it wasn't exhaustive enough.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? 他に質問がある方があれば日本語でも大丈夫ですので、ぜひ聞いてください。いろんな方がご参加してくれまして、本当に感謝しております。このテーマは、ちょっと、稀ですから誰も参加しないと思いましたけど、やはり興味のある方がいらっしゃいまして、本当に嬉しいです。
So, hi.
Okay.
So I thought it was really interesting the last slide, how you're saying that the engineering is not only to develop new apps, new information, but to make it accessible for everyone in the first place, because not so many people just don't have access to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just occurred to me that so many people, for example, don't have any idea of what's happening in other places, or what advancements in society, or like other people's inequalities, just because they don't have this wide view, even with the internet. So imagine not having access to it at all. There's basically no way to know anything. I mean, not anything, but like a lot of stuff that's happening around the world.
Actually, several organizations have been arguing lately that access to internet should be considered a human right, because you're so detached from the rest of the world. You are so, in a way, discriminated against if you don't have access to internet, especially now that many people require you to work from home. And if you happen to be a person who just doesn't have internet access at home, what do you do? It is very hard. So those are some of the important challenges for us engineers, really. We can do so much in this area. And, we don't even have to, that doesn't even have to be our first priority. You see, most people in, for example, Kenya do not have a PC, but most of them have smartphones. So the people who were developing smartphones, who were developing portable mobile devices with access to internet, actually contributed to increasing the way Kenyans are connected to the rest of the world. So you don't have to want to raise people out of poverty, but you can do a project that the side effect is to also do that. So it is important to make those developments that serve everyone, that are not only going to be implemented in rich countries, but also in the developing countries, because simply this way, your work, your technology has more meaning, and it reaches the wider circle of people. Of course, it depends on the person, whether you do research for money, whether you do research for fame, research for meaning, research for society, research for helping people. But it is not the only way to do research for people in order to make a change in the society. You can be doing it for money, you can be doing it for fame, and you can still help people by doing that if you choose your project wisely.
Yeah, I was reminded of how, for example, with the coronavirus pandemic in Mexico, they started doing TV education, like classes instead of online on Zoom. They were also doing classes on the television, on the national television, right? But how many people just don't have electricity? How many people don't have a television? Or maybe the signal is too weak, or maybe they only have access to it one time during the day, so it's still a problem. But it also, on the other hand, it also spread a lot more education when before it was some people had to walk long distances just to go to school, right?
Yes, so coronavirus exposed a lot of strengths and a lot of weaknesses of our system. And it really showed us that, for example, right now, I don't have to be doing this meeting in a classroom. I don't have to get people to come any specific to any specific place. I can be in Japan while some other person is in Poland. Aneta, for example, the other person is in France, another person is in another side of Japan. And we can still come together and discuss this topic, and we can connect more. So the pandemic showed us that we can do that, and also exposed how many people actually do not have access to electricity and internet, because before we didn't know that. And then, for example, your coworker tells you like, I can't work from home because I don't have access to internet, and that's it. And you're just thinking, oh, I thought everyone had access to internet, but it's not always the case. And even in developed countries, for example, in Poland, I was told not everyone was able to work from home. So thank you for your contribution very much.
Yeah, no, I also thought about, for example, homeless people. Let's say you're searching for a place to stay, but you don't have access to internet. Maybe your plan on the cell phone, even if you do have a cell phone, maybe your plan on the cell phone finished, and you don't have access to internet anymore, and you can't find where to stay. And that can literally be life or death, depending on if it's a two-night, like if the night is too cold or something. Yeah, just access to electricity and internet is so crucial for everyone, refugees or even people that are still in their countries and still in their homes.
Yeah. Sorry, I was writing in the chat. Yes, I was listening to you. Thank you for providing insights into this discussion. Yeah, I agree. I can't say anymore, basically.
Oh, yeah.
So it's 7 p.m. So it's been 1.5 hours. I think everyone is tired. So if you, what do you think, Katsumi-san? Should we finish at this?
Yes, now already 7:00 p.m. So I think better to close this session. Well, however, we already sent the questionnaires, the URL, so please access to the link, and then please write down the frank opinion. So yes, or maybe you can send an email to us, so I can send to the Olasan later. So anyway, maybe now is a good time to finish it, I think.
Yes. Okay. So thank you very much for coming today to this talk. Thank you very much for listening. I'm very grateful. There is people from many countries watching this right now. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for your time. And most of all, thank you for listening to Parwana, because it was her message that I wanted you to hear most of all. So thank you very much. ありがとうございました。参加してくれて本当に感謝しております。
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for wonderful presentation. Yes, thank you very much.
It was a wonderful presentation. It
Yeah.
was way more than I imagined.
ありがとうございました。
Yeah, what a wonderful. Yeah, and also I think we have to send a thank you email or thank you letter to our I forgot her name. Yes. Parwana-san, yes. We have to.
Oh, yes,
her.
of course.
Thank you. Maybe I will prepare some like official letter to her, and then maybe.
Oh, yes, sure. Okay, so I'll give her contact details. And if anyone has any questions to Parwana, you can message me. There is the official SDGs email that you can use, and I'll ask any questions that you want me to ask directly to her. Okay?
There is also the Youth Refugee Movement Facebook page, no?
Oh, yes, there is. Oh, let me go back to it just quickly in case you're interested. So, for example, Instagram, yrm.world on Instagram. and it comes up their activities. She is the leader of it, so you can contact her through there, and that's how I first found her. Yeah. Okay, so should I leave?
Yes, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you, everyone. I'm really grateful you took part in this today.